Welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. I'm your host today. I'm Iris Acker. Let's meet the panel. First up, she is an actress and she's a writer, Karen Stevens. And he is a theater reviewer and an arts, what did you say?
Journalist.
Arts journalist. I like that, it sounds good.
So do I.
And our guest panelist today, because he was so good when he was an actual guest at our show, replacing Michael McKeever
Can anybody
today,
do that?
is director, playwright, teacher, Michael Leeds. Welcome, Michael.
Glad to be here.
And our topic today is what does a dialect coach really do? Meet our dialect coach, Evelyn Learner. Welcome, Evelyn.
Thank you, Iris.
So what does a dialect coach really do?
Well, I work with actors and help them to achieve a dialect that they need for their role, and also sometimes to reduce their accent that they may have, to neutralize it.
Do you find that most actors need help? I mean, American actors, I know that you work with actors from all over the world, Australia, Poland. I mean, they hire them because they're Polish, or they hire them, do they hire them because they're Australian, or you have the job of making them American?
Very often they need to get an American dialect. Yes.
Very often.
Yes, often they need to get an American dialect.
We have a lot of Australians right now working
Right.
in this country, and we kind of resent them.
Yeah.
Because they're so good at what
I know,
they do.
I know. Sometimes
don't
I
they?
kind of get that mixed feeling where I'm kind of getting them ready to sound American, and there are American actors out there who are waiting to get cast in roles too, so.
Karen, you're an actress.
Yeah.
As an
Yes.
actress, ever had to work with a dialect coach?
I've never worked, well, one show that I did called Bridge and Tunnel, where I do 14 different accents.
How about that?
They actually brought in, I do a Russian man, where they brought in someone to help us pronounce the words, because I do a poem, a Russian poem, and also someone from the Middle East to help me with a Middle Eastern accent. But as someone who's done accents before, I was very curious to hear you expound on the physiological component of learning a different accent.
Right. Okay. You mean as far as the anatomy and how
The
it kind of
anatomy, the
works?
placement
Yes.
in the mouth and
Right,
the tongue,
absolutely.
behind the teeth, and all
Yes. Well, you know, it depends on if you already have that phoneme with the sound in your own native language, and then it's much easier. But for example, if there's someone from almost any country other than one that has not been speaking English from birth, they would not be used to sticking their tongue out for the TH, for example. So they have to be taught to do that. As far as the vowels, a lot of it has to do with the shaping of the mouth, the lips, but also the tongue really plays a very, very large role.
Give us an example give us an oral example of what you're talking about.
Okay, so for example, if somebody, let's say they don't have a TH sound, instead of saying father, they would say like fodder. Okay, and then they may say like my fodder, my mudder, my brudder. Okay, and then the other thing you have would be the vowel sound, where especially, let's say if Spanish is a first language, they may say my mother, and my brother. So they'll do the vowel instead of the in mother and brother would become like an ah. So we have to work with the vowels. We have to break down the consonants, and basically teach the tongue and the lips to form. The vowels are most difficult because they're not as tangible. They kind of happen somewhere inside the mouth, and it's very hard to place them. And which is the reason why accents, dialects are usually not perfect. And if someone did not speak English as a first language, they usually are not able to ever reduce it to sound American.
Say that again. English?
If they spoke English as the first language, let's say, for example, they're from England, Australia,
from England, yeah.
South Africa, New Zealand, then English is their first language. And they already have been accustomed to producing all the vowels and all of the different consonant type sounds that we already make, but they may have them, they use them differently, but they're capable of using them. So what happens is they are able to sound American. Okay, but if someone is, let's say, speaks Spanish as their first language, or all of the European countries, then most of the time they will never be able to sound American.
Well, I was wondering more specifically about. I had actually tried to use you actually for a production that I directed
really?
of Steel Magnolias. I tried, but you were very busy, which I thought was terrific, which made me want to use you more. But
Thank you.
the question I have is one: what is the difference between working with actors as opposed to working with somebody who just has a speech impediment? And then also, I mean, I'm very interested in: do you find that they want to learn it, or do you suggest by rote as opposed to doing a line the way you would do the line, so that it's not a line reading? How do you work, and is it different with each actor?
Right. Well, you mean as far as a line reading is concerned, you know, when I work with actors, I'm very careful that I don't try to give them the line. I let them know that it's their process. Very often, I do have to let them know which word would get the emphasis, just for the sake of the way that our American accent or our American dialect flows. We kind of go up and down in a certain way. We put the emphasis on a certain word, which may not be put on that word by someone that doesn't speak English as a first language, but I don't want to get involved in what they would emphasize as an actor. You know what I mean?
Right,
so
sure.
I kind of let them know that I need to give them the space to do that, but I let them know that the communication of what they want to say is not going to come across if they don't emphasize that particular word. So having said that, I do like working with someone with a script. I do like working on the lines themselves. Sometimes we do some drills, but very often we work with the lines on the set. When I was working on Magic City, for example, we used the copy whenever I was working with the actors.
Does everybody have an ear? Like, I can't do accents. So is that because of my ear, that because I can't hear it?
Well, some of it could be having the ear for it. But they're also, you know, you may not know what is causing the accent or the dialect to sound the way it sounds. You know that it sounds different, but you might not know what it's coming from, what the differences are coming from. And that's what my job is, to kind of break down where the differences exactly are coming from and to just kind of spot those. And once you would make those replacements, then you would be able to do it.
A lot of our audience are civilians, and I think they don't even they don't know what it is you do. So could you walk someone through the basic process? An actor comes to you, they say, I have a role as a Czechoslovakian mother-in-law, and I'm from Brooklyn. And they come to you and they say, I've got this role. What do you actually do? What's the process?
Okay. Well, first I would want to hear how they sound, you know, as far as their Brooklyn dialect is concerned, and have to see what I need to do with that. But also, I need to analyze what their character is. So let's say it's a Czechoslovakian mother, like you said. I need to know more specifically about what that character is like. So where are we going? And then I'd want to have some copy that they'd be able to have, something from the actual show or from the film, and I'd have them read it to me first, the way they would normally do it.
Right.
And then basically I would let them know what changes need to be made. I would need to do some research. I normally get the copy in advance so that I can analyze it. And I would need to transcribe where the sounds are and then teach it to them.
I was going to ask how you would know what a Czechoslovakian mother sounds like.
Right. I do lots of research. I'm online, and I'll say, you know, first of all, I could find things on YouTube. I'll Google a Czechoslovakian accent. I also have certain websites. There are archives where I'm able to hear the same exact line that's spoken in every possible accent.
I know I have a CD with every accent
Really?
imagine on it. I've used it many times over.
Yeah.
Like you say, having an ear. If you're an actor, I think usually you can imitate. You know, it's. I had an audition once in New York. I'll never forget it. He's so famous, I can't think of his name. I had to do 5 accents in one monologue, and I personally physicalized it. I had to do a German. I put a monocle in my ear, and I clicked my heels together. I had to do Swedish. Do you remember the commercial, Take It Off?
Take it all off.
That's what I did. I did that commercial, and
I want to see that.
that's what got me through. I had to visualize it and physicalize it. Do you
Right.
teach that way as well?
To do the physicalizing, yes. It's
I
very
think an actor can
important.
do anything.
The body language, the way that the face, for example, let's say, like,
Yes.
you know, could be like a flatter type of face, or, you know, just the way the person would conduct themselves, and physical distance would
Also
be different.
rhythm, right? I mean,
Yeah, I was just going to
The
say
rhythm.
each language has its own rhythm.
Has
was it
Rhythm,
Sid
yes.
Caesar, and of all people, Ross Martin was another one who would go on Johnny Carson, and they would talk gibberish.
Yes,
But
and
it was in the rhythm and the meter of the language, and they didn't necessarily know the language, but you would swear it was Swedish, it
that's
was
a
German.
talent. That's a talent.
And it was
Yeah.
fascinating.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm with you. Cue words do it too. By the way, on this CD, I had to learn Irish very quickly. And when I went to the first audition, it came out Cockney. And he said, no. He said, so that's when I first got the CD. And what they taught me to do was clue myself, sure, and I'm after thinking. In other words, to start to think in my head something that's very Irish, sure, and I'm after thinking, then I can do that. And I've been using
Right.
that ever since, too. Do you do that? Like
To
a little
do-
clue to...
Yes, there
Like a
needs
phrase.
very often there's a trigger. There's
trigger,
just a
that's the
certain
word I'm
trigger.
looking for.
Like sometimes, for example, if somebody wants a British accent, it can be sort of a trigger. Could be maybe like spitting marbles into your hand, because everything has to come forward. The whole face has to come
That's
forward.
physical.
And yeah, I have a book that has all kinds of different triggers, you know, that I use. There are some wonderful handbooks that I
I'm
like
curious,
to work with.
Bill, as a reviewer, have you ever panned anybody for having a bad accent?
Well, not panned, but I've certainly, I've got an ear for a false accent, and particularly when an accent, somebody thinks a Midlands British accent is the same as a Cockney.
There you go.
I'll often mention it. I won't necessarily take them apart, but I'll say, I have said it, and I can't remember what it is. I have said recently, you know, these people have been nowhere near Paris in the last 50 years. and that's, but you know what fascinates me is, was a Laurence Olivier, who did several American roles, and he's, you know, a brilliant technician. And yet, if you go back and look, the movie The Betsy, horrible movie.
Yeah,
but his own Long Day's Journey into Night, several others. Laurence Olivier, who was a genius, was terrible at American accents, really bad. And yet there are people who American audiences today look at and think they're American, or not. Dominic West from The Wire, who is British. Idris Elba, who is in Luther but was also in The Wire.
A lot of Australian actors.
And a lot of Australian, and you can't, unless somebody tells you, you don't know. How is that possible? I mean, there was a question here. How is it possible that really good, terrific actors may not be able to master accents, and others are just really good at it? Do you know what?
Depending
it
on
is?
where they're from, or you're saying even
I don't
from the
know.
same place?
As I said, if you listen to Laurence Olivier, he could never do a good, convincing American
Right.
accent.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very active thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, just like some people are lazy and don't like to exercise. I mean, is it possible that people are not accustomed
Yes.
to moving their mouth and their tongue in certain ways?
Exactly. And some people, for example, the people that do come usually from Australia, the people that are British, they do have the ability to move their tongue the way that Americans do. The people from other parts of the world don't have that ability. Because of evolution. Like, for example, coming from New York, I could never completely lose my New York accent, because it's kind of evolved where my nasal cavity, the whole resonance between my mouth and my nose, has developed in a way that it's going to resonate and always sound New York. Very few. The only one I've ever heard that really has gotten past her New York accent is Terry Gross on Fresh Air.
Yes.
Oh, what, did she really have one?
She's from Brooklyn, like me, yes. And I can hear her compensating for it a little bit sometimes. She'll kind of go a little bit the other way. But one of the downsides of my business is that I listen to these things sometimes more than just being entertained. But she's really the exception. So anyway, I wanted to sort of get back on track. What was I saying? But yeah, so the evolution is that you'll have a tendency to always speak in your native accent. And like you were saying, Karen, there are some people that are able to kind of adapt more easily than others.
Yeah.
Physiologically, if for example, I can't roll my R's. So if I had to do a role that was a Spanish-speaking actor, could
Right.
you surmount that?
What I would do then is I would accentuate what you are able to do. And the whole thing is, you know, the whole thing as far as anybody being entertained as an audience, you want to dispense with disbelief, right?
Right.
So you want to believe that the audience will want to believe that you have this Spanish accent.
Right.
So you give them enough to hang on to, and therefore they will ignore.
You can't physiologically
Get you
change.
to roll your
Yes,
R.
yeah.
I could probably get you to have a little bit of a different R. It may not roll all the
okay,
way. I'm not
right.
a good I'm not a good R roller myself.
Right.
But I would really, right.
I go,
So-
Very difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I would just tell you to emphasize, you know, just nail the other parts that you're able to really do very well, and they'll buy it.
Evelyn, let's talk about some of the films that were down here. Magic City, Charlie's Angels. What else did you coach on? We want to know the dirt, really, about these
Okay,
people.
but before you answer that question, I just want to just ask a quick one. Do you break phonetics down for your clients?
I do.
Okay.
I
that's
do.
it.
Yeah, I don't necessarily teach them the international phonetic alphabet, but if there is a phonetic symbol, you know, sound that they really need, I will definitely explain it to them, and I'll break it
Are
down.
you also a speech therapist?
Yes.
She hasn't
I'm also
answered
a
my
speech
question.
therapist.
Let's talk what our audience really wants to know about.
It's a
Yeah.
free-for-all,
On the
folks.
set. On the set. Let's talk about Charlie's Angels. Name all these films that you've done
Magic
down here.
City, as we talked about. I also did a reality TV show on for Discovery Channel, One Car Too Far. That was very interesting as well.
Why was that interesting?
Because I needed to really flesh out the characters. You know, on reality TV, even if you're watching The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, they take the character and they tell them, we want you to, if you already have a tendency to be very catty, we're going to make you like really viciously catty. So you need to kind of bring out the tendency of this character, and I needed to do that to kind of characterize them more.
Yep.
I also did a movie called Hear Me, the Movie, which was directed by Mark Durso, and I worked with Jessica Marcano, working on giving her speech of somebody that would be deaf.
Wow.
So I did that as well. I did a show called The H Word, which is a one-woman show with Franny Sheridan, where we did 9 different dialects. And I also worked with a young actress on Army Wives. She had a major role on that show as well. But what would you like to know about Magic City?
Everything.
Okay,
The dirt.
everything.
Who had an accent that had to get rid of it? Who did you give an accent to?
Okay. I worked. I'm not going to name exact actual names, unfortunately, but.
Particularly Greg, Todd, and Avi. Go.
They're friends. We can deal
Okay,
with
yeah,
that.
Avi was great. I sat with Avi a lot of times during the table reads, and he and I are both fluent in Yiddish, and we'd both be, did you notice that he didn't get that word or whatever? And I'd be like, yeah, it wasn't actually perfect. And then after a while, one of the directors came to me and he said, now I want you to transcribe every episode so that the actors would have something to have at the table read that would tell them how to pronounce every word that would be questionable. If it was not an American word that they would be familiar with. So I developed a phonetic key that they'd be able to use, and I would transcribe and just write out every single word the way they should pronounce it, and it really worked very, very well. But anyway, getting back to, so we did the table reads, and then sometimes I would consult with the actors afterwards and let them know how it went. But when we would first start, we did a little bit of drill work where I'd work with their accent. Now, for example, the leading female role was somebody from the Ukraine. And the director did not want her to sound American, which was a good thing because she wouldn't have been able to sound American. Anybody from the Ukraine, if they came to me as a private client and said, eliminate my accent or make me sound American, I would say, please don't spend your money, you know, it cannot be done. But anyway, so she needed to still have an accent, but she needed to sound much clearer. And so that everybody, all the Americans, the audience would be able to understand her. And also she needed to sound like somebody that actually had lived in America for a longer time.
Quite an
so I
assignment.
needed to reduce it just to a certain level. And that worked out very well.
You made her Cuban. Her character was Cuban, wasn't it?
No.
Oh, I was thinking of a different character.
No.
Sorry.
No.
Ignore me. Go ahead.
From Ukrainian to Cuban, that would be quite a feat.
No. She just needed to sound actually like someone that was from somewhere in Europe, yeah. And then there was also an actor who was British, and he needed to sound purely American, and he did a fantastic job.
What show was that?
Also Magic City.
Magic City.
And I had an Australian actress who also needed to sound American, and she
No problem.
really beautiful. Yeah, she did very, very well.
As a director, Michael, and have you had shows where you've had accents and problems? And
Yeah.
how do you cast?
Well, what I usually do is, first of all, if somebody like Evelyn is available, that's, you know, I have like a list of names, which you're on the top, by the way,
Oh, you do
and
have
try
them?
to get them to you. But the first thing I do is basically I go to YouTube, I look for those people who are speaking that or thing, and I give it to everybody because I think it's important that they're all on the same page. So that's what I try to do. It never really totally works out, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
that's what I try to do. But I have another question too, actually. You said that with the reality show, she was catty, but they wanted her to be more catty. How does that
Yeah.
reflect in terms of speech?
Wow.
Okay, well, basically, I was just using that as an example, you know, as far as The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. This particular show, there were two males in the show, and one of them needed to be very macho, and the other one needed to be kind of goofy. That was kind of his. So I kind of needed to bring that out, bring out
How?
those characterizations.
How, in terms of speech?
How would I do that?
Yeah.
Well, let's say the one that needed to sound more macho. He had a tendency in his voice to kind of go up in pitch a little
Right,
bit.
okay.
So what I needed to do was get him to resonate more from his chest, and we worked a lot on breathing. And the other character, he basically needed to be funny, kind of that comic relief type of character. But since that was his tendency to be that way, he also had a tendency to speak too quickly. So it was difficult to understand him. I needed to slow him down a little bit.
We're going to bring up your website so that everybody can get
Okay.
in touch with you if they choose to, because you are, in fact, a speech therapist for anybody who stutters, perhaps, or lisps. And so they can get in touch with you for that as well.
I wanted to ask a question about lisps and speech impediment. I noticed that there are quite a few actors that have a lisp or a speech impediment. And there was a time when studios would work to help actors get rid of those kinds of things because they wanted their speech to be perfect and et cetera, but now not so much. And what do you think of that? I mean, I find that curious because as someone watching it, sometimes it bothers me because maybe I'm a little old school.
Right.
You know.
Absolutely, I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very specifically that. Do you have actors who come to you like because they have a lisp or something that they need to specifically work on, and can you work with them to get rid of that?
Yes, I mean, yes. The thing is, what's really interesting is I'll have actors come to me very often, and that they don't even know that they have a lisp, but they say that they were told that they're not as easily understood as they should be, and then I tell them, you know, that they have a lisp. And I do work with them on that. It depends on the kind of lisp. I did have an actor come to me not too long ago, and he had a type of lisp that would be very difficult to be able to work with. It needed very highly specialized types of exercise. And
In the short time we have left, what I think is fascinating to me anyway is English was not your first language.
Right.
It was Yiddish.
Yes, I spoke Yiddish only until I was 4.
And you speak, so in 1 minute, tell me, how can you do what you're doing so well as a result?
Well, because I was young. If anybody starts to speak another language before they're 7 years old, they probably will not have an accent. And also, I was highly motivated. I had a very, very heavy Brooklyn accent, and probably with a little bit of that Yiddish type of inflection to it as well, until high school, until probably after my sophomore year of high school. And then I started working on my accent.
Because you chose to.
Yes.
So dish the dirt in some of the time we have left. Name a movie or an actor in the last 5 years that you went, what accent could they have possibly been trying to do?
Oh, you know what? Off the top of my head, I don't have an answer to that exactly. However, I will say, we all love Jennifer Lawrence. And I know what accent she was trying to get, obviously, for American Hustle. She wanted to have the New York accent. And she made a mistake on a particular word, and she needed to say the word, we would say article, and she needed to say it with a New York accent, like article, and she said article. She said article instead of article, and I was like, Jennifer.
Fascinating. There's so much more we could ask her.
Yes.
We could have just our own curiosity, I think, really, and we'd come to you for help. If I can again. I have,
Thank you.
and she's helped me. She really has.
Thank you.
And that's what we're all about. Fascinating topics, I think this is. And I want to thank our curious panel for asking the questions that we're hoping you wanted to hear the answers to. I want to thank Karen Stevens. I want to thank Bill Hirschman. I want to thank Michael Leeds. And certainly our guest today, Evelyn Learner, who has really taught us and shared with us, we're all been fascinated by it, I think. And she helps theater actors do what you enjoy seeing on stage. So we're hoping that you will enjoy going to the theater as we encourage you to every week. And to find out what's happening on the stage in all of South Florida, just go to floridatheateronstage.com and do join us again next week, please, to Spotlight on the Arts. Thank you.